It's a rare condition this day and age to read any good news on the newspaper page. And love and tradition of the grand design, some people say, is even harder to find. Well, then there must be some magic clue inside these gentle walls. 'Cause all I see is a tower of dreams, real love bursting out of every scene. Days go by, it's the bigger love of the family.
There are a lot of stupid opinions in miniature painting, and one of the big ones is that wet blending is a pro-only elite technique. And miniature painting is the only paint-focused medium that actually believe this. Everybody else learned it on day one. So we're going to break this down. First, what it is and how to do it. And then because it is so quick and easy, we're going to run a time trial. That ended up some kind of way.
Alrighty. Oh, that was a bit of an encounter. Let's strip wet blending back to its barest basic form. It's mixing paint, which is something that I can guarantee that you've done even before you started miniature painting. And it may even be something that you've unintentionally done while you've been miniature painting. I've said it 100 times before, if you can mix paint on a palette, you can mix paint on a model, and that's wet blending. The only difference is we're not trying to create a singular color. Just like we did on the little color sample, we're going to repeat that same process on the model. Something that I seem to do more so than any other miniature painter that I've noticed is I put down a base coat of the darkest tone first. The reasoning behind that is that we are only playing with the two colors and we don't have to worry about a third coming in and screwing everything up. Even if it is just a black or white primer and dry. Because even a dry color that isn't actually mixing into anything will affect the saturation levels that you get coming through. And we don't want that. We want to control as many variables as we can because we're trying to do a thing here. One of the big things to remember is not every paint is made equally. Some will be stronger and some will be weaker. So if you're looking to create some even tones, it makes sense that you need more of the weaker color to combat the stronger. And another big thing is, this is not a one and done process.
The important part here is to let the paint dry between layers.
Once that first layer is dry, you can come back and reintroduce those same two colors and start to refine the blend. Don't worry about hitting perfection in that first shot because you are probably not going to get it. Think of it as laying down a rough plan and then you're going to come back and tidy up. And even if you wanted to set it as a rough guide, you don't have to come back in with wet blending. You can use any other blending technique that you want from here. Glazing works incredibly well to soften out some of these transitions that you've already set up. And another thing that we're going to be going over in this very video is stippling. You can use it to add layers as you would traditionally, or you can even wet blend a stipple.
Hey man, what is behind that door? With this, it's a painting crew. Oh no way. Yeah man, check it out.
I chime in with a haven't you people ever heard of?
I fucking hate you.
To be honest, my favorite part about that whole bit was the shit-eating grin when he closed the door. Every time we start talking about wet blending, there seems to be one dominant question. Well, there's actually two. Firstly, what is the consistency that you should be using for wet blending? This can change from person to person, just like every other variable in miniature painting. For me personally, I like a little bit more body, and because I use the Army Painter Fanatic line, straight out of the bottle seems to be perfect. It's a great consistency that seems to hold its shape and it won't rut or bleed into anything that you don't want it to. But the big question generally comes from people that live in drier climates, or you just don't paint that fast. And that is, how do you stop the paint from drying before you finish wet blending? And there are a few ways to combat this. One, work on smaller areas. It makes sense that if there's less of an area to cover, it's going to be a little bit quicker. Two, plain and simple, move your hands faster. Or three, you can actually alter the drying time if you use something like a retarder. Just like any other medium, the more you use, the thinner the paint will be. But on the flip side, the more you use, the longer working time you get. There is no perfect ratio I can give you for that one. It depends on where you live, how you work, and all those kind of variables that I just don't know. For me, I don't really need it.
That's it. That's really it. I know that this was a fairly simple one because there's only two presenting colors, but wet blending really is that simple.
And because it is that simple, we can probably start looking at wet blend stippling. The idea is exactly the same. You're using wet paint on top of wet paint to create a gradient that's going to end up somewhere in between and mix the things. The difference here is instead of a sweeping, a swirling, or a general brush motion, it's a little bit more of a stab. And for the most part, just like regular stippling, it will create a blotchy effect. Blotchiness kind of gets a little bit of a bad rap. And yes, to be completely honest, most times we don't want any blotchiness at all because we're after some kind of smooth result. But that variation in texture and coverage can be great for organic materials. Mostly, think rock and bone is fantastic for rock and bone. Calm down, Votan players, I said rock and bone, not rock and stone. But this would actually be pretty great for rock and stone. Or for something like I'm doing here. Now, I don't know what the Hornet from Hollow Knight's head is actually made out of, but I'm kind of imagining like a soiled linen. Kind of like the deputy dog bed sheets from The Waterboy. And if you get that reference, you old as shit. Alright, let's get ready to do the thing that really didn't pan out so great.
Before we dig into this time trial, don't forget to check out the description where you'll find a link to the Army Painter where you can pick up the brushes, paints, and just about everything else that you see in these videos. And if you use the code HERESY5 at the checkout, you'll get a sweet discount. And for everyone in Australia, that sweet discount and same HERESY5 code will work at in-games. And while you're there, there's also a link to the Patreon and our merch store. Alright, are you ready?
Super Captain Obvious moment, this footage is sped up. The entire model took about 18 minutes. The whole idea of this portion is, 1, I ran out of footage pretty quickly because of how quick and easy it is, and 2, I wanted to actually show you how quick and easy it is. Now there are a few different factors here. 1, yes, 18 minutes is pretty quick for an entire model, but we're obviously not going for display level quality. The other thing is this is an incredibly simple model. There's only 2 presenting colors and 3 paints in total. But if you had something similar, say Nighthaunt for example, you could knock these out pretty quickly. 18 minutes for an entire model is actually pretty insane. And to be completely honest, stylistically, I would 100% prefer this to Slapchop. Now here's the thing, we started off pretty strong, but things are about to take a turn. Remember when I said,
The important part here is to let the paint dry between layers.
well, I didn't do that. I was a little too busy being Mr. Big Shot on campus swinging my Magnum Dong around that I fucked up. But we show the wins and the losses here, and at very minimum, this is a good example of what happens when things go wrong. When you don't let the layers dry enough and you come swooping back in with a loaded brush of wet paint like an absolute hero, you will tear the surface. And when you tear paint, it can actually lift several layers, and that's where you get unwanted texture from, because it actually turns into physical texture. So the takeaway from this whole video should probably be patient. Just because the technique itself is fast doesn't mean the whole job isn't gonna take time. The outcome is more important than efficiency. But if you're not being an absolute flog on camera for a video like me, you should be fine. My biggest uphill battle with this one was obviously the reds into the darkness. Because the darkness is a lot stronger than the flag red that we're using, it was harder to get a balance, and every time I kept coming back in with a load of wet paint, I had to reset those values all over again. And because this is such a small model, as much as I was trying to jump back and forward to the other details, I was still coming back to wet paint. And just like we were talking about before, when you go over and over and over wet paint before the layers dried properly, you're going to start to tear some things up. The first time I painted this model for the first half of this whole video that we just watched, it took about half an hour to get everything on it done. So the difference of 10 to 13 minutes drying time is probably necessary. Okay, it's actually definitely necessary. No matter how fast the technique is or how quickly you can pump it out, if you have to do it twice, it's not really efficient. Now the worst part about this is that I knew what I was doing was wrong, and I just kept on fucking doing it. As much as people try to be motivational in videos, this is one of those moments where you can give up. Knowing when to stop or quit is just as valuable as knowing where to start and what to do. And if you've been wondering this whole video, no, this is not from any game. Well, it kind of is, it's from Hollow Knight Silksong. And yes, after this entire thing, I kind of do want to make a Silksong themed Trench Crusade warband. And here's where I decided to finally just give in. This video became a combination of how to wet blend and then how not to wet blend. And yes, the glory shots are from the first one that I painted. You know, when it was actually good. A massive thank you to InGames, the Army Painter, and the best Patreon members in the world. Big love, you filthy heretics.